So when you first start Blender, this is the screen that you're greeted with. This screen is a little bit overwhelming, but don't worry, most of the time you will just be working in this main window right here. So this main window right here is called the 3D viewport. It is where your models will be. Right now you have a cube, you have a camera, and you have a light in this 3D viewport. At the top right here, you have an outliner. The outliner is just a list of all the items in this 3D viewport. If you select the cube in your outliner, it actually selects the cube in your 3D viewport. If you select the light, it selects the light, and so on. Below it, you have the properties. The properties differ from object to object. So if I have a light, some of the properties for lights have to do with how bright the light is, what color it is, and so on. If I select a cube, the properties of a cube include color and how light affects that color. Or there's this modifier tab which will be used throughout pretty much all of your projects. But more on that later. At the top left here, you can save your files, right? So save normally. You have edit, render, window, and help. Most of the time you will not be using these. To the right of it, you have all of these tabs right here. Layout, modeling, sculpting, and so on. Most of the time here, you'll just be doing layout, maybe sculpting, and shading. Really, shading is the same thing as the material property, except you have more options there. Now, to move around your 3D object, the way that you can do that is by scroll wheeling in and scroll wheeling out. That kind of zooms you in and zooms you out. You can also walk around this cube by holding middle mouse button and rotating your mouse. Right? That kind of makes you walk around this cube. And you can also pan the camera to the left and to the right by holding shift. And while you're holding that, middle mouse button, and while you're holding that as well, you move your mouse. And that kind of moves you around. To recenter the camera back onto this cube, so if you move your camera far away and then you can't find your object, what you can do is you can select the object in your outliner. Okay, so it's selected, and now I press the period key on my number pad. Okay, and so that just recentered our view. Okay, let's make this box a little bit bigger. Okay, so let's do some transformations on it. And so to make it bigger, I can press S and I can move my mouse out and in. Okay. If I want to actually apply this transformation, if I like how big it is, I just left click. Control Z is to undo. And again, if I press S and try to make it big, but now say I don't want that, I change my mind, I no longer want to resize it, I just right click and that just brings it back to where it came from. Okay, it doesn't reset it, it just brings it back to where it came from before I pressed S. I can now also move this box around by pressing G and moving it. Again, left click applies the transformation, right click will just reset where it came from. And I can also rotate by pressing R and moving the mouse around. Left click to apply, right click to stop the transformation. Let me Control Z back to the start. Okay. Now, most of the time you don't want to just scale a box or you don't want to just move it randomly. What you want to do is scale it or move it or rotate it along a specific axis. You have these two lines. You have the green, you have the red, and then there's actually an imaginary blue going up and down. The green represents the y-axis, right? Just like in math class on a graph. Green is the y-axis. X here will be the red axis, and Z, which goes up and down here, is the z-axis. It's invisible, but it is there. Say I want to resize this cube just along this red line, just along the x-axis. So what I can do is I can press S, and then while that's happening, I can press X. And now I can only resize it along the x-axis. So again, S, and then whichever axis you want to lock that transformation to. You can also resize it up and down. So S, Z, and that will resize it up and down. So let me just kind of make it like a castle wall. That's what we'll be building eventually. Now, you notice that I have this fine grid here, and half of my model is below that fine grid and half of it is above. So I want to move it up. I could try pressing G and then Z and then moving it up until it kind of just touches. But if I want to be a little bit more accurate, what I can do is I can go into the front view. To go into the front view, I can press the number 1 on my number pad, and now I'm just looking at it from the front. And so now, if I press G and Z, I can just move it up and it's a little bit more accurate. I can zoom in if I really want and just bring it down so it just touches like that. And I can zoom out again. Okay, so now it's just touching the floor. Now there's other views. It's not just a front view that exists. There's a side view, and that is accessed by pressing 3 on your number pad. I can also go to the top view by pressing 7 on the number pad. Okay, so that will get me all those different views. If I'm at the top view, so I'm how I am now, and I press the number 9, that brings me to the bottom view. So the opposite of the top view is the bottom view. If I press number 1, this is the front view. Now I press number 9, this is the back view. Opposite of front is back. If I press number 3, which gets me to the right side view, and I press 9, that gets me to the left side view. Right now, there's no difference between these because the object is very symmetrical, but later on, there'll be a difference when you actually have interesting models. Anyway, let's build a castle out of this wall. So let me go to the top view, and let me build some castle walls. So this is one section of my castle walls. The way I can do this is I can take my wall that I already have, press Shift D to duplicate, then I can left click to apply that. Now if I press R to rotate, I can kind of move my walls around. But say I want to be more accurate. I don't want to just randomly rotate this wall. I want to rotate it by a set amount. So what I can do is instead of just pressing R and then Z to rotate it, while I'm in this mode, I can just press the number 30. And this rotates it exactly 30 degrees. And now if I left click, I can have my castle wall like this. For this part, I will not rotate them exactly, but I will just kind of make do. And so I'll just quickly add all of these castle walls around. There. And I kind of have like a interesting castle walls. But a castle is not complete without the towers, so let me add towers on every single one of these connecting pieces. The way that you can add a tower is by pressing Shift A. This opens up a menu. Go under Meshes and press Cylinder. Cylinder is like a Coke can, right? So you click it and boom, there is your cylinder. Let me just focus on it by pressing the period key on my number pad, and let me go into the front view so I can actually see it a little bit more accurately. Now, my tower is a little bit short, so let me actually make it a little bit bigger and also a little bit taller. Okay, and let me move it up a little bit, and it's still a bit short, so let me just press S, Z, and scale it up. There. And now, I can just go with top view, move it into place. Now I have my tower, but ideally on top of the tower I would like to have some roof. So I'll go into the top view, and sure, I can spawn a cone by pressing Shift A, Mesh, Cone, and that spawns the cone back down here. But I want to spawn the cone up here, right? Why make extra work for myself by moving this cone up there? So let me delete that cone. Let me go into the top view, and now to make something spawn or appear on top of the cylinder, what I have to do is I have to move this 3D cursor on top right here. The way that you move this 3D cursor is by holding Shift and then right click. And now my 3D cursor is on top of this cylinder. Now if I press Shift A, Mesh, Cone, my cone spawned right here. I can move the cone up by pressing G and Z, and now I can scale it however I like. Now I want multiple towers. I want a few more towers. So what I can do is, sure, I can recreate, my tower by pressing Shift A, cone, and cylinder and move it all. But we can do this a little bit faster, and that is by selecting my cylinder, then Shift selecting the cone. So I have both of them selected. Let me go into the top view. While they're still selected, I will press Shift D to duplicate. I will move my mouse, and this is where it is. And now I can just place it where I want it. And I want the tower to be right there. Okay, and if I go from the side view, I can see that my tower is still aligned with the bottom. Let me go back in the top view while still having all of them selected. Shift D, move, Shift D, move, Shift D, move, and Shift D, move. left click anywhere else to deselect, and now this is my towers. Let me make a castle gate right here by selecting a wall, scaling it along the x-axis, moving it to the right, duplicating it, moving it to the left. So now I have a little bit of a hole in this wall. It's a little bit, it's not the most satisfying door. Later on, when you actually learn a little bit more modeling techniques, you will be able to make beautiful doors, but right now you can't. So this will do. And the last thing that remains is colors. How can we add colors here? Well, let me select an object, so like this roof. Go into the material properties down here, and I will have this screen right here. If I click new and change the base color to whatever color I want, so I'm doing this kind of brownish color, then you notice, sure, the color here changed, but nothing changed on my 3D viewport. And that is because right now I'm in something called solid shading, which is a very fast way for a computer to display this image. Okay, so it's very lag free, but also there's a drawback, you don't see colors. So the way that you can actually see the colors is by going to here and clicking on this button. This brings you to the material preview, and now you see colors. Now you can do the same thing for this roof right here. You could press new again, choose a color and try to match the color exactly, which is a little bit tedious. But what you can do instead of that is, instead of like creating a new color, press this button right here, it's a little drop down menu, and find the material that you already created. And you can do the same thing for the other cone. Go into the material, find the one that you created, and apply. If you don't want to do it manually like this, what you could do is now select all of the roofs and select the roof that already has a color on it last. And this is done, shift left click. And now if I press Ctrl L, I can click link materials, and that puts the material on everything. Okay, now if I want to change the color of all of these cylinders, you select the cylinder, make a new color, change the color. Let's say I want something like a blue. Now I can select the other cylinders. So select the first one, shift select second, shift select third, shift select third or fourth, fifth, and then shift select the last one with the color. Always choose the one with the color last. Now Control L, link materials, and now they all have the same material. Okay, so now finish your castle, add the color to the walls. If you want, make your castle more fancy. If you want, you can add trees to the castle as well. For example, a cone, if you have few of them stacked on top of each other with varying heights, you could say, oh, this is a tree. Obviously, probably your tree should be green, right? And you could kind of take this. Let's go from the side view, take it, move it down. From top view, move it wherever you want to have a tree, right? Except you would, again, have to change the color. But yeah, hopefully that gets you started. If this video was way too fast for you, which I think it was pretty fast, please watch this one multiple times. But yeah, I hope that kind of helped.